Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Very excited because I have my number one partner in crime with me today, Bridget Rasmusson, who is on my team and heads up our team here at the Carolyn Group. If you guys have not connected with Bridget on LinkedIn, or if you don't know who she is, please go on LinkedIn, look for Bridget Rasmusson, and connect with her. Welcome back, B.
Thanks, Tom. How many years has it been? It's amazing. Time flies.
Been a while, man. It's been a while. So we've
Wow.
been doing the podcast. It's over 5 years. But I don't think you and I have done an episode probably in like 2 years, maybe. Is it possible? A
I
year?
don't think so. Yeah,
Dang.
we got the
Well,
band back together.
getting the band back together, you guys are in for a treat because what we're going to talk about is the state of the job market for like the past year or two, really, so that you guys can kind of hear from us what we're seeing, what our opinions are, what we're seeing from clients, what we're seeing from candidates, and you guys are going to learn a lot. Before we get into that, this episode is sponsored by MSL Mastery, which specializes in MSL coaching and training, team training programs. So if you're an aspiring MSL, you absolutely should check out Aspire MSL, which is specifically for you to land your first MSL role. It's an online course, community step-by-step guide. We have a program called Rise for new MSLs. It's a coaching program and a cohort. And then there's a program called Leap for medical affairs professionals that are further in their career that are looking for a cohort and a community and a coaching program. So MSLmastery.com, you can learn all about these programs and team training programs. So check it out. All right, B, let's get into this, man. What the F and F is going on with this job market? I mean, let's just start there,
Well, you said
right?
it. I didn't. What
What
the
do
F and
you
F?
what are you seeing? Let's just I want to hear your opinion.
Yeah. So I would say that last year for a lot of people was demoralizing. I think that things were very stagnant, things were very sluggish. And I actually noticed it, Tom, and I'm sure you did too, at the end of 2023, the words budget and, course correction were being floated and bandied about. So I think that it started at the end of 2023 where companies were really reviewing their headcount and last year was slow. I think we were in a gridlock. I think that it was a chess match that basically got paused. And I think a lot of that was due to uncertainty in the market. A lot of that was due to the political climate and the coming election. So it was a slow year for job
Yeah.
seekers and for hiring.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say that you're spot on because I think we all kind of noticed that same. We after post-COVID, there was this boom that happened in like 2021, 2022 was like the
Absolutely.
heydays, right? And then that really tailed off in 2023, but 2024 was like, I think just freaking brutal when, if
Pulling
you
teeth.
really look at it, right?
Yeah, it was pulling teeth. And again, there were layoffs. There was a lot of fear, uncertainty. So individuals looking for a job, it was not an easy time for them to navigate.
Yeah. Let's talk about because a lot of people ask me, and I'm sure they ask you, what are you mentioned a couple of them, but what are actually the specific, what might be the factors that led to and are still contributing to this weakened and stalled job market, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to kind of kick things off, companies again were re-reviewing their budgets and tightening their belt straps. So there was a really conservative approach that was implemented last year where companies were trying to stretch the current headcount and trying to, they weren't necessarily looking to expand or grow. They were just looking to make do with what they had. Also, the change in the election, I think that that had a huge impact on forecasts and also people's mindset. So it was as much tangible factors as it was people's mental state. There was going to be a coming change in leadership. And with that, philosophy, policy, regulations. So for the pharmaceutical industry, of course, that was going to cause kind of a re-review and a step back, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and markets don't like uncertainty. And we saw that 2023 and 2024 were the kind of almost the epitome of uncertainty because of some of the things that you said. I'll add, I did a little research on this and kind of took some notes and tried to think about some other factors. I think high interest rates had a big impact. I think that the money dried up. I think when you look at specifically at the biotech sector and you look at the amount of deals that were happening over the course of the past couple of years, 12 to 18 months, the money's dried up. That's huge impact on hiring, right? Look at the number
Exactly.
of IPOs. You could see it right there. Um,
Totally. And those companies are funded by that. So if
oh
the
yeah,
money is not to be found, guess what? Everything goes on hold. It's just tumbleweeds.
yeah. And then you had this whole tech uncertainty because of AI and what was that going to do and how many jobs was that going to take and how is that going to, both help as far as efficiencies, but hurt the workforce. So that creates additional uncertainty, which I think when we talk about layoffs, I think that had a lot to do with some of the layoffs as well. But there was also, you mentioned like one of the things that I've seen is there's this, because of the uncertainty, there's this locked in workforce. You have
Hmm.
people that are afraid to make a move. No one's taking a risk right now
Right.
because they see the layoffs and they're like, I don't want to go from this situation where I feel like I know what to expect to another situation where I don't know what to expect.
Right.
So I think that's another piece of it. So let me see if I'm missing anything. What so let's talk about the impact that all this is having on the job seeker.
Sure.
I know that you talk to job seekers a lot. Obviously, I talk to job seekers a lot in what we do. And there's just a lot of discouragement. There's a lot of
Yeah.
rejection. There's a lot of people that are out of work that are frustrated, quite frankly, scared and worried about what their future might look like. So, what advice do you have for those people?
One thing that I like to think about, Tom, in my professional life, but also my personal life, is the concept of time and how it's ceaselessly marching on. So right now you have this one set of circumstances. Tomorrow it could be completely different. It's in flux as we speak right now. Like dominoes are being set up, things are shifting, things are changing. So I think knowing that your set of circumstances now could be completely different 3 to 6 to 12 months later, cultivating that idea of movement, I think is very positive, especially if you've been on the job market for a long time. I also think that there's great benefit in tapping into not only professional relationships you have, but friendships. So relying on people that you trust. If I were in a position where I lost my job, the first person I would call is my dad, and I would pick his brain for advice. And if I didn't work for you, you would be the first person, you'd be the second person that I would call. So I think that relying on people that can fill your cup and just keeping in mind that nothing is ever stagnant. Things are constantly in flux, things are constantly changing and shifting. That introducing that into your mindset and really cultivating that, I think could help individuals who are feeling very discouraged.
Yeah, it's great advice. I totally agree. I think that you have to give yourself a little grace and realize that number one, it's not you. I think that's another important thing to keep in mind, guys. Anybody out there that's struggling, that's frustrated, you've been at this for a while, you're not seeing enough progress. It's not you. It really isn't. Now, maybe you could be doing more. We'll get into that later, but the market is very unforgiving. So it may not have anything to do with you or your background. The other thing is you mentioned time. What we've seen, I've been doing this for almost 25 years. What goes up must come down, and vice versa. Nothing stays the way it is. And I think that timing is everything. And you could be, and it's also a feast or famine kind of thing. You could have no interviews today and you can have three interviews tomorrow. So you have to be resilient and
So true.
positive, right?
So true. You have to persevere and to your point too, Tom, don't personalize it. And that's very hard coming from an acutely sensitive person. It's really hard not to personalize it and internalize it. You apply for 50 jobs and you're not really hearing back and it's just radio silent. It's not you, it's the nature of how job seekers find jobs these days, and also just this very, very unforgiving market that we've been navigating.
Yeah. What advice do you have for job seekers to help them stand out?
That is a fabulous question. And the answer is going to seem really simple and obvious, but back when I was growing up, I played basketball and my dad was my coach. And he always said, don't miss the foul shots and don't miss the layups. And that really stuck with me. He's like, it's basically gimme points. And I think a lot of job seekers and interviewees these days, Tom, are missing layups. It gets right in front of them and they're not doing the work. Preparation, it's number one. You know, these candidates, a lot of candidates we're seeing are going to these interviews, and the hiring manager will ask, well, why are you interested in the opportunity? And they blank. And you can't do that. That's such a
Yeah.
layup. Why do you want to work for the company? What do you know about the product? What can you tell me about our, phase 3 clinical program? Like, people blank on these very, very easy questions, like absolute layups that you should be crushing all day, every day. I think another thing that I've noticed too is that people aren't very intentional when it comes to their resume. So they'll blast out the same resume regardless of job. And I think sometimes making a few simple tweaks to your resume to really highlight why you're a good fit for that particular role or that particular therapeutic area, that can move the needle. Like, just focusing on the details can really shift someone's perspective on your candidacy. Lastly, and maybe I'll be tagged as a Pollyanna, but I don't see a lot of people saying thank you these days, which I think is a huge misstep. And it's such an easy thing that takes 5 minutes, but I can't tell you the amount of hiring managers that are like, Bridget, the candidate never circled back. They never wrote me a thank you note. They never reiterated their interest. So leading with thanks and gratitude, it's genuine, and it's a real differentiating factor these days. A lot of people are just not saying thank you. What would you say, Tom? Do you have any thoughts
Well,
around
first
these
of
points?
all, I love that basketball analogy. Thank you for sharing that story with your dad. And because here's the thing, guys, what we're hearing is that these basics are the main reasons why people aren't moving forward and aren't getting jobs. People are losing out almost on a technicality by these things. They're losing out because they're missing layups. So I think if you can listen to Bridget's advice, control the controllables and take advantage of the layups and the foul shots because that's what's going to move you forward in the process. And it might sound simple, it might sound silly. You might actually look at this and be like, "Well, geez, those they're so obvious." But it's the obvious things that actually prevent people from moving forward. Even, now we've gotten into this virtual environment where there's so many virtual interviews. A lot of people are failing virtual interviews because they're not dressing the part or their background's not staged or they don't have good virtual presence. Their eye contact is off. They're fidgety. They're just not good on camera. They can't present on camera. And if you're an MSL and you can't present on camera in this day and age, you're not getting the job. These are more basics that I think if you can follow, you're going to give yourself a fighting chance. The other thing is rely on your network. In a crowded market, how do you get to the front of the line? Well, if you know someone, if you can get a warm intro, that gets you to the front of the line. That makes you stand out. And I think that people sometimes they know it and they'll say, "Yeah, I know, Tom, networking is so important." But it requires effort. You have to do
It
it,
does.
right?
And I think it also requires um, people can sense when you're not being genuine about it and you're just trying to make it a transaction where, hey, I need you to do me this solid. I need you to help me win this job. Whereas if you've maintained a good relationship with that individual, again, back to the previous point of discouragement, you call someone that you trust and that you believe in and that, you can ask for advice, and having these genuine connections to go to bat for you will make all the difference. But if it is transactional and if it is disingenuous, people will also pick up on that energy. So you got to plant seeds throughout the course of your career, and then people will show up for you when they when it's your time of struggle or challenge.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And I think that that's good career advice for the long term. Not just, when if you can do that and if you could stay connected and in touch and even pay it forward to folks and help people along the way, they're going to remember that. So when it comes time for you and you need to tap into that person and need a favor, they're going to be there for you. So I think that's really good advice. I think that's important. It's a longer term play, but I think it's really important. I'll add one more thing and I'll share a story. Forgive me that I have to throw a Metallica story in here, guys. I'm a big Metallica fan. I have to do it because I heard this recently and it really correlates well to the interview equation. And one of the things that I think is really important is to try to be creative in your interview preparation. And when you talk about standing out, what can you find out about that company, about that hiring manager, and something about your background that maybe you can insert into the conversation that's going to help you to stand out? So, back in 1986, I think it was, early on when Metallica first started, their bass player died in a truck in an accident. I think they were traveling, a bus accident. They were traveling and Cliff Burton got killed. So now they are looking to replace their bass player, a guy by the name of Jason Newsted, who was rehearsing for the part, who certainly was an accomplished bass player, was competing against hundreds of other people. What he did was now this is back before the internet. So it wasn't easy to get this information. He found out Metallica was on tour and he found out what their set list was. And he memorized and practiced every song that was on the set list. And then when it was his turn to audition, they said, "Okay, what do you want to play?" He handed them a list of songs and said, I can play any one of those songs." So the drummer Lars, who was like in charge of this process, he looked at it and he goes, "This is our set list." He's like, "Really? What do you know?" He goes, "Play the first four songs." Plays the first four songs perfectly, right? They invite him back the next day. Guess what they asked him to do? Play the next four songs. So now he memorized and learned all of the songs that were on their set list that he knew maybe they would want to hear, and he wound up getting the job. It's the same thing in the interview process, guys. How can you get creative?
Amazing.
What advantage can you give yourself?
Yeah, he smashed it. And
Smashed
he
it.
didn't even have the internet. Now we have Google, now we have AI and ChatGPT. There's no
There's like
reason that we should not be prepared for something.
there's like no excuse. Um, let's talk about hiring expectations from the employer side. How have
Okay.
things changed recently? Obviously, with the market being what it is, have things changed in hiring manager expectations and how things are judged on that on the hiring side?
I would say, Tom, that hiring managers are looking for the best athlete available. And because there is a surplus of talent available, there is talent that's still spilled over from 2024. There's been a ton of layoffs, especially at the onset of 2025. There's a lot of really excellent people on the market and looking for jobs. So because there's a surplus, hiring managers are very keen to that and they understand that. And I would say they're no longer letting time dictate their hand. They're saying, hey, I'm going to hire the best person available when the time is right. So I would say that they're being more selective. And that's why when you do go into an interview and you aren't prepared or you don't dress professionally or your cat walks across your Zoom screen, during your presentation, candidates are losing out on opportunities and there's other candidates that are in process. So I would say that hiring managers, because of the talent available, and it's top talent too, it's really, really A-level people that are stacking up applying for these jobs. So hiring managers are in a position of, selectivity.
And I think that when that's so accurate and that guys, that means that there's very little margin for error because you're competing against a more competitive, search marketplace. There's other candidates that are competing for the job. Now, I have to be careful. I don't want to freak you guys out and put so much stress and pressure on you that it makes you underperform or get
Right.
too nervous because I'm telling you this, but it's the truth. And it should influence the way you prepare for these interviews. Not to be perfect, but to make sure that you're making your layups and you make sure that you're making your foul shots. So I just think that that's really important knowledge, really important to know.
I agree. And just to quickly add something, Tom. I think when all is equal, the hiring manager is going to go with the person that's enthusiastic and shows their heart on the interview. So, say everyone shows up to the band audition and everyone can play the first four songs. Who are they going to go with? They're going to go with the guy that's or a gal that's rocking out, that
Yeah.
has a smile on their face, that's excited to be there. It's palpable, it's tangible. Hiring managers pick up on that. It's a nonverbal, it's often a nonverbal cue. It's a differentiating factor that shouldn't be discounted.
I am so glad you said that because, and that's a quote from my book, by the way. All things being equal in a job search, the position is always awarded to the person that shows they want it the most. People pick up energy in interviews. They'll pick up your interest and your enthusiasm. So if you can bring a genuine sense of not desperation or wanting, but hey, I admire your company. I love this opportunity. My background and my skills are perfectly aligned with this. Congratulations on your success. Wow, what an exciting time for your company. These are the type, that's the attitude, that's the energy, that's the mode, that's the interview mode you want to be in when you're interviewing with folks. Because if you can't pull that, I know it's not everybody's personality, but if you can't pull that off, you're going to lose out to somebody that can. Really, really important.
And we see it.
We see it. So, what are your thoughts? I mentioned this locked in labor force. What impact do you think that's having on things? And what are your thoughts on this concept that people are just kind of staying put?
Yeah, and I can't really blame people, Tom. I think that with all of the uncertainty, whether you look at the economy or politics or the state of the world, there's a lot of fear. And I think when people feel fear, they really root down and they are more averse to change. And so what I'm hearing from our recruiters is, candidates that are gainfully employed, if they're 60% content, let's say, with their job, and there's no real factor pushing them out or motivating them to seek change, they're not going to seek change right now. And I also think that the pharmaceutical industry is a very tight, small world. And so these same individuals are seeing friends and colleagues that have been out of work for 6 to 12 months. And that's scary. That's a spooky thing. That's a nerve-wracking thing. So, hey, maybe I don't love the science I'm working with. Maybe, sure, I would love to have a manager that would let me do a few more med affairs projects, but I'm pretty content. And this is a known entity that I feel comfortable with. So that those gameplay employed folks, they are locked into a sense. And I can't really blame them for feeling that way, just because what if they take a risk on a venture, clinical stage biotech and everything collapses like a house of cards? What are your thoughts?
I I I can't blame people either. I think that you have to look at the variables of where you are, and you have to realize that in this market right now, um, there was a time when there was so much opportunity that people could pick and choose. And now, since there's limited other opportunities, um, I think it becomes a matter of being really careful and understanding all of the the variables that exist within your current situation, meaning, how much money do you have saved? What are your goals? Where do you want to be in the next year to 5 years? I'm not saying that
You
you
have kids
shouldn't.
going to college, that's something that pops up. Like,
That's a
where are
huge
you
variable.
at, right,
Yeah.
in your personal life?
Right. Now, if your goal is, hey, I'm stagnant and I want to make a move to get a promotion, or I'm not getting paid enough and there's other opportunities that are coming to me. I'm not telling the last thing I want anybody to take from this conversation is that I'm telling you to stay where you are. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, and I'm just echoing with what you're, kind of mentioning, Bridget, is that I think you just really need to understand what your priorities are, what your variables are, and you have to make sure that you're making a very smart and informed decision before you do anything because again, we're in a situation where there's not a lot of margin for error if you make a mistake. You don't want to go to a risky situation and then find out that you're out of work and now you're struggling back in this job market. The other thing I'll mention, and we didn't talk about this at all yet, and I think that this is important, is that when we look at the job market, there are different challenges and struggles and scarcity depending on your level. What we're finding is that the MSL market is still pretty hot. It's pretty good for experienced MSLs. Maybe there's less jobs, but I don't think it's a bad time to be an MSL. I don't think it's a bad time to be an aspiring MSL either because we're seeing a lot of people land their first MSL position, especially people that are in our Aspire program. And I'm not trying to tout the program, but it works. And we're seeing so many
You took the
people.
words right out of my mouth. Call Sarah, call Patrina,
I mean, I'm just
get them
guys.
on the phone.
It works. That's all I could say is like you need guidance and you need the answers to the test, and that's what it is. But the point is, we're seeing people land their first MSL job. The last thing is when I think the higher you go, the harder it is. So anyone that's listening to this that may be at director senior level, senior director level, VP, CE. I talked to a CEO yesterday, and with amazing experience in the biotech and pharma sector. She's like, Tom, what's going on? What is happening? It's not you, it's the market.
It's not you. And that's a great point, Tom, that I had jotted down that especially this year, we're seeing an uptick in individual contributor roles. Like the faucet's been turned back on for
Yep.
individual contributor MSL positions. Like you said, aspiring MSLs are ascending the rungs of the ladder. But the leadership roles, we've not seen a corresponding uptick in those types of positions. And so when we're getting calls from that, I got a message from a national director who I think is one of the most fabulous and smart people on the planet. And, she's looking for a job. And there's just not much out there right now for leaders.
Yeah. But there will be. It'll
There will
change.
be.
Let's talk about that. I want to like what do you think is going to happen next? Where do you see things in 6 to 12 months from now? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what's your opinion?
I think that we are trending upwards. And I think that just this year, Tom, there's been a real uptick in new opportunities. And also, what I find interesting is it's a lot of team expansions, and it's a lot of teams being built from scratch. So I think we're going to see an absolute explosion of opportunity and new therapies coming to market. I think that it's a great, great time to be within medical affairs. I think there will be more opportunities coming, the second half of this year into 2026 and there's movement. It's like the light got turned back on. We're getting calls from companies. We're seeing hiring managers make decisions. We're seeing teams expand and grow. There's a lot of focus on growth right now.
Yeah. I will tell you that I'm going to make a prediction. I agree with you. I think that we're going to see things turn around this year, and I know why. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think what's going to happen, and you could mark my words on this, and I in a year from now I may be totally wrong, but I think the money has been on the sidelines for way too long. I
Oh
think
yeah.
there are investors that have been in wait and see mode for a very long time. I think that whether you love or hate this current administration, I'm not going to get political, but I think the one thing that this administration that I think they're going to do is lower interest rates and make money more affordable. I think that that's a goal. I'm not saying that it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think that that's a goal. I think that the combination of lower interest rates and the availability of this money that's on the sidelines that's going to eventually come back into the market after we get through some of this current uncertainty. Look, right now, as we're having this conversation, there's a lot going on. There's world wars going on, there's crazy things going on, riots, and everything else. And again, I'm not trying to get political, but it has an impact. It has an impact on this stuff. But I think that the availability of funds could have a major shot in the arm for the job market. So I hope I'm right. That's my prediction. One last question I have for you, B. So if you can offer one piece of mindset advice for a current job seeker right now, what would it be?
Silence your inner critic. Yeah, I think that we sabotage ourselves. And I think that there's a real lack of belief in self. And our self-talk is so critical and integral to our day to day and what we ultimately can achieve. And so I would say to anyone looking for a job right now, be very, very careful of your thoughts and how you're speaking to yourself. I had a friend years ago say to me, why do you talk to yourself like that? Would you ever say the things that you say to yourself to a friend, to me? And I was like, absolutely not. Of course not. I would never say, you look ugly in that dress or, you can't win that job that you're applying for. So audit how you're talking to yourself because if you're constantly critiquing yourself and taking yourself out of the game at every turn just through your mind, you're never going to achieve what you potentially can.
Yep. I love that. And I'll add to that because I love all this stuff. Two things. It's so funny that you should say that because I just posted a video today on LinkedIn about how you should never verbalize a negative thought and the impact. And there's research behind that. So check out my video on LinkedIn. It's actually a little it's an older video, so a little inside scoop that I reposted. Um, the other thing too is there's this common story of I think it was Russell Wilson who his father taught Russell Wilson, the famous Super Bowl quarterback, who struggled in his career, but then had this amazing year as a Super Bowl MVP. His when he was raised, his father taught him, if not you, then who? So maybe you take that thought process into the next interview. If not me, then who? Why not me? Why can't it be me?
Why
And make
not?
and make that your motivation. It's my turn. Why can't I get this job? So now you focus your efforts on everything you can do, the layups, the foul shots, the preparation, the planning, the attitude, the interest, all the things that we're talking about here. And you put that together so that it can be you.
And
Damn,
it will be you. And it will be you.
this was good. Holy crap. B, thank you for joining me. This was just an amazing
Thank
conversation. I
you,
hope it
Tom.
helped a lot of people, right? I hope.
Yeah, and if anyone has any follow-up questions or thoughts, we would love to hear from you. So keep us posted and we'll keep you posted on we're all in it together too. That's the best part. We're all navigating this tumultuous, chaotic time together. And if you're feeling discouraged, again, my best encouragement would be to reach out to somebody that you love and you trust and who fills your cup. So
Don't go it
thanks for
alone.
having me, Tom.
Yeah, man. Don't go it alone, guys. Love you all. Thank you for all your support. Thank you for sharing this show. Um, we love what we do and we appreciate you all. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.